The Planning Commission meeting for September 28th, 2015 is called to order. And first item on the agenda is, are there any public comments for items not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will move forward to our first and only public hearing item tonight, the Pavilion Park 3 development application, zone change file ZC 15-02 and subdivision file TP 15-03. Laura, do you have a update for us on staff report?
Before you move to that, could we?
Right. We need to do declarations. Since the last hearing, has any of the commissioners either visited the site or had any ex parte contacts? Bob?
No, none.
Zach?
Nothing to add.
I don't either.
I have not spoken with a living soul about this project.
Good idea.
You're speaking with
Nothing.
Tom?
Neither.
Okay.
None.
And I have not either. Does the audience have any questions for the commissioners on their declarations? Okay, seeing none, then do you have a staff update?
Thank you. Laura Turway, I'm a planner with the city. So before we start, I wanted to give you a brief summary of the proposal. Let's see if you could see it there. So the property is located at 19588 McCord Road. The applicant has submitted this application to change the zoning designation from R10 to R6 and then also to subdivide the property into 25 lots. We have a staff report that is entered into the record that has findings for all the applicable criteria listed on your screen. The zone change is a map. Here's a map of the proposed zoning. You can see that it's adjacent to R6 and also smaller zones, which is R3.5, as well as county zoning designations. For the subdivision, a screenshot of the layout is provided. They have proposed street trees, sidewalks, planter strips as well. This is the tree removal plan that has been reviewed in the staff report. There's only a few trees that are identified on the tree removal plan because so many of the trees on site are less than 6 inches in caliper. A layout of the proposed utilities. Now, as you recall, last commission hearing, this has been before you twice so far. The last commission hearing, there was a lot of discussion regarding water mains in Leland Road. After that commission hearing, you allowed the applicant to submit written testimony, and that they did. They talked about in the written testimony utility extension along Leland Road, which we had talked about, and they also talked about extending that water main on McCord Road as well. So there's 2 conditions of approval, condition of approval 8 and condition of approval 10. 8 talks about the extension of the water main in McCord Road, and condition of approval 10 talks about the extension of the water main in Leland Road. So again, last time where we left off at the hearing, a lot of the discussion just talked about the Leland Road. This is the map that you saw last time of the water main extensions. As you recall, at the last hearing, the city submitted into the record a proportionality analysis and a nexus finding as well for the conditions. The code requires that both water mains be extended to and through the frontage of the subject site. The extensions will benefit the subject site, and we show that they are proportional. And then also there's an SDC credit separate than this process that the applicant is available to submit for, and then whatever finding for the SDC credit the city makes may also be appealed to the city commission as well. So the city met with the applicant numerous times since our last meeting, and we've come up with an amended condition of approval number 10. There's a memo in the back and then also before you with the amended condition of approval. We believe this amended condition of approval complies with our code and it meets the concerns of the applicant. So with that, we recommend the Planning Commission approve ZC 1502 and TP 1503. We're here to answer any questions you have. And again, I want to remind the Commission that the record is currently closed.
Damon?
Does this addresses condition 10? What's the status of condition 8?
We believe that condition of approval 8 is fine how it's written and does not need to be amended.
Okay.
So could you go into a little more detail on condition number 10 since we just got it?
Sure. Wendy Marshall, our development project manager, is here as well. I can show you the condition language. I also have a strick-out version where you could see the old, but it's sort of messy on the screen.
It's okay.
Do you want to see that?
No,
Okay.
you can just talk us through it.
So on a big picture, the condition of approval requires the applicant to extend a 12-inch water main along Leland Road from where it currently is through to their property frontage and along their property frontage. There's language, the last line of the condition identifies that there are SDC credits available for oversizing. So rather than a standard 8-inch line, the applicant is required to put in a 12-inch line. So there are SD credits between that difference between 8 and 12 for the property in front, the portion of the line in front of their property. And the portion of the line that's not in front of their property is also SDC eligible. So here's the map of Leland Road. So this portion adjacent to other adjoining properties, they'll have to extend the line from where it sits across other people's properties to their own frontage. This is SDC eligible. And then also the oversizing, the difference between the 8 and the 12 along their frontage there is also SDC eligible. And so
SDC
credit
eligible.
Yes. And so they may apply for SDC credits, and that happens through a separate process other than this. And the condition clarifies that there is a credit eligibility available to them.
Laura, is the water line going to be looped? I didn't see the word looped anywhere in the condition.
Not at this point. It will once the rest of the system connects. So when the other property, so this green section, when that's developed, they'll continue along their frontage, and in the long run it will be looped.
Okay.
Other questions for staff?
No, thank you for that.
You have anything else for us?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you. So at this time, we can have discussion among the commissioners. We have a recommendation by staff for approval with conditions, including the amended condition number 10.
Yep.
I gotta find all the numbers here so I can do this right. Don't want to have things be. I move approval of ZC 1502 zone change and TP 1503 with conditions of approval, including the amended condition of approval 10 as presented this evening.
I'll
Second that.
All right. Commissioner Mahoney?
Are there any discussion among the commissioners before we vote?
Yeah, I just want to say on our record that I do support the conditions as outlined by staff. I thought 8 and 10 were fine the way they were. However, since the staff was able to come to some additional agreement regarding condition number 10, I am okay with that, and I'm glad that was resolvable. Other than that,
Any other comments or questions?
I'm going to comment on this. I think the commission and the city are going to be facing a lot more of these infill type of developments where this kind of problem is going to be presented to us, and I think it's in the public interest to resolve these things based on the staff's report, which reflects public policy. So I think the design of it is fairly decent. I note that they're going to get a few more lots, and that doesn't bother me so much. But I have no problem with the adoption of the condition. So I'm going to support this.
Any other
Well, now that he
comments?
said it, I don't like the weird lots. That's, and I said that on the previous one as well. I don't think those are appropriate.
Other comments?
I've got one. I think that when we're going to go from a zone change to a zone from a high density to, or a low density to a higher density, I want to make sure that all the public facilities are all in place, and I want to rely on my engineering staff that, you know, because I don't want to sit up here and try to engineer a subdivision from here. I'm not qualified, and I don't want to do it. But I do want to rely on you guys to make sure that when we do go from low to high density, that we do have adequate public facilities to serve that high density.
You mean higher, not high density?
Wow.
Yeah.
Higher, yes.
Yeah.
Increase.
Yeah. That's what when we go from low to high.
I appreciate the fact that you said that. I would say my only concern about the staff report was that there seems to be a statement in there, well, the other property is zoned R3.5 and the other one zoned R6, and so this one should be R6. And I don't
That
think
has no relevance to me at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That to
I
me
agree.
is not really a good finding as to why the zone change should be approved. So
Okay. Any other comments?
I
call
agree
for
with
the
all
question.
I agree with my fellow commissioners who have spoken. I couldn't say it better.
Okay. So we've got the question called.
Yes.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff?
No.
Commissioner Maybe?
Aye.
Commissioner Guile?
Aye.
Chair Kidwell?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Go forth and develop.
Spend lots of money.
Go forth and develop.
The City Commission meeting for this item is October 21st.
Okay, so we will move on to the
Official session.
Planning Commission work session. This is PC 15-208, Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan, overview and discussion of the readoption process. And for the information of those
Don't take any more.
those in the audience, we're not taking any public testimony tonight.
Or
This is
caffeine.
strictly an informational work session. We will have public hearings in the future as this is presented, but at this time, we're just doing a work session so that we can understand what the process is going to be about and the procedures. So, Pete, are you?
So as Pete,
Before you start, just as a quick question came up while I was reading this, is that how many of the current serving planning commission were here for that? Were any of us here for that?
I don't believe so.
Okay, that's what I thought. I
August
didn't think
2008.
I didn't
No.
think any of us were here. I only gave you the benefit of the doubt because I said, well, maybe you were here.
I think that was a couple of years before.
So
I
this is
started.
like all new.
Mhm.
This was adopted in late 2008.
Yeah, I started in
It was adopted in
2010.
September of 2007.
Oh,
Okay, then we weren't. Yeah, we weren't
I
here.
started in 2010,
Yeah, we weren't here.
before my time.
Okay. So what we're hoping to do is that this was adopted by the commission. It was appealed.
Sort of like, where do you start on this long,
Yes.
winding road?
and it was appealed
The background music.
to the Land Use Board of Appeals.
We're going to go into that on
You'll go
slide
through all of
5.
that.
I've got the whole
The
timeline.
whole
Yeah.
history. All right. So what we're hoping to do tonight is just because none of the commissioners were here when we adopted this, was to just give you kind of the background of the plan itself, and then hopefully when we bring this forward, we're also going to have a brief discussion about when the city commission remanded it, what the responsibility of the planning commission are based on the remand that I had from the previous commission. And then just so that when we come back up for that readoption process, you'll have some of this background that has happened over the last 7 years or so.
Do you actually have that timeline written down? That would be so helpful.
Tight.
Wow, awesome.
Well,
So-
let's let Pete
Yes.
get through his report, and then we can talk about what else you want and what you want me to circulate.
Right, and I think you've already mentioned this, but it would be great if before we actually get into the deliberations on this, that we understand what the ground rules are for us, what's open for discussion and what's not.
Yes.
We're gonna get through
Okay,
that.
you're going to go through all that?
And as another thing, is there a possibility that we could take a little field trip
Sure.
together so that,
Tony's got time.
oh yeah, absolutely. We know that Tony likes to get out of the office. And at the end, there'll be ice cream for everyone.
And then take a duck truck.
Might be hot chocolate. by that time.
Tony's
Okay, you
itching
think it'll be
to
hot
get that
chocolate?
tie
Okay.
off.
We're doing it this time of year.
Well,
Yeah,
how
I will
about-
take the tie off for the tour.
How
I
about hot
promise.
fudge sundaes?
Yes.
And a duck truck.
Okay,
Okay.
but first, the staff report. I've also been asked to remind you all to speak into your microphones. So, thank you, Pete Walter, back before the Planning Commission with another concept plan readoption. The concept plan that was put before you in 2007, 2008 had the following goals. These are all discussed at length in the plan and have policies as well. It was a complete and sustainable community, model of sustainable design, green jobs, sustainable industries, natural beauty, multimodal transportation, safety along Beaver Creek Road, connections with Oregon City High School and Clackamas Community College, a unique sense of place, and ecological health. This is an overview aerial photograph of the concept plan boundary. It takes in the golf course, Oregon City Golf Course in the south, and abuts Thayer Road on the north. Old Acres Lane is the road to the immediate south of the golf course there, bisected by Loader Road.
Could you point that out? Because that is really small on there.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell where any of the roads were on the maps that we got with the report, because I know my eyesight is not that great, but it was really...
It's better than mine.
This
Hard
is
to
Old
read.
Acres Lane, right here.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Here's Loader Road. There's the high school. Myers Road intersects right here. Here's Thayer Road. And the transportation system plan envisions a secondary road coming through this area in some location. Beaver Creek Road does have limited access. It's controlled by the county. So.
And Pete,
Mhm.
point out where the Beaver Creek Road LLC subdivision
Right.
was approved.
So
which
the
triangle that is?
SP 1401 apartments that we were
Or
approved,
remember from 8 months ago, a year ago?
that was a staff level approval that was appealed to the city commission. And then on to LUBA, and has been through LUBA and been upheld.
So is
So
that in the
that-
city limits now?
That is in the city limits. It was one of the original areas of the UGB and was allowed a zone change in 2010 to MUC 1. And conditions of approval for that zone change were that it would be planned in the spirit of the concept plan and have the same kind of uses and density. This is part of the mixed-use, central mixed-use village area. So we'll talk about that a little
Is
bit
there
more.
any other high-density residential zoning anywhere near that?
Well, you've got everything along Glen Oak Road to the north of Glen Oak Road
I mean, existing.
existing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Sequoia
Sequoia Landing is all.
in between Myers
yeah.
and Glen Oak, where Pete was just pointing.
All of that is R2 in here. So when this aerial photo was taken, that wasn't built.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, but all of that is now high-density apartment
Can you
and
back up a
townhomes.
little further to what I would like to call, from my surveyor friends, the point of beginning? How did
Okay.
this end up getting in the urban growth boundary to begin with?
All right, so as a series of UGB expansions created the area, and the most recent expansion was 2004. So areas that are in this area have a Title 11 requirement on some of them, and Title 4 requirement for all of the industrial lands. I'll show you where that is. This is the plan conceptually. It shows the 5 land use areas. The North Employment Campus part of it is where the original industrial expansion of the UGB is to take place. We'll refer back to this. Then the southernmost portions of this are primarily mixed use and residential. And I'll go into more detail once we talk about the LUBA appeal. So Carrie, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So I'm not going to follow the slide. I'm going to go back
Yeah.
further than that, if that's okay, Pete.
Yeah.
Okay, so in September of 2007, the City Commission adopted the Beaver Creek Concept Plan that you see here. That decision was appealed to LUBA. It went to LUBA, and the petitioner...
Is your mic on?
It's on.
Yeah,
Am
just
I-
move it. I can hear you just fine, but you
Yep.
can't, I guess.
Okay.
I have a voice that carries, right? The petitioners raised a number of assignments of error. Their first assignment of error related to Title IV industrial lands, and by Title IV we're talking about Metro Code Title IV, which Metro subscribes a certain number of industrial lands that have to be provided for. And at the time, in 2007, we were all talking about large lot industrial and the need for large lot industrial. So the first assignment of error was all about this question about whether or not this map designated enough Title IV industrial lands to match Metro's Title IV mapped industrial lands. In the Metro Code, there's a map that Pete has a picture of. So that was the first assignment of error. The second assignment of error had to do with adequacy of Oregon City's analysis of utilities and services and transportation. And in 2007, when we adopted this plan, we had a transportation system plan that was from 2002. We had a water system master plan that was from before 2002.
Yeah,
And a sewer master plan that was from before 2002.
so the dark ages.
So we didn't have underlying utility infrastructure plans that analyzed this area because this was a new concept plan area. So we, what we did was we assumed feasibility in the concept plan. And we were challenged on that basis, whether or not that assumption of it's feasible to extend lines, it's feasible to build the roads out, it's feasible because we're dealing with sort of relatively flat, except for in the southeast corner we've got some slopes. But I mean, we had identified those, but we didn't have backup documents to make the kind of goal findings that the petitioner believed we needed to make. So that was the second assignment of error. The third assignment of error had to do with procedures and how the process went in creating the plan in the first place. So we briefed the case, and in August of 2008, LUBA remands the case back, dealing solely with the first assignment of error. LUBA said it was a very close call, but that the deviation between what Metro's Title IV map showed in terms of industrial lands and what we had showed was too great. And that was the only issue LUBA dealt with. Did not deal with the utility issue, did not deal with the procedure issue at all. So we approached Metro, in the face of this remand, we approached Metro about how to solve this disparity between the Metro map. And in December of 2010, excuse me, Metro adopted Ordinance 10-1244B that reduced the amount of Title IV designated lands. Now, Ordinance 10-1244B was known as the capacity ordinance, and what it did, in addition to altering the metro map, it established the capacity that the metro urban growth boundary needed to support growth over the planning horizon metro-wide. So it evaluated what the metro need was. They found that there was a deficit in the amount of residential land in the UGB and a shortfall of large lot industrial sites. They determined that these could be met with efficiency measures, but there needed to be additional residential capacity and industrial land, so they identified those areas in North Hillsborough. So a companion ordinance, 11-1264B, expanded the urban growth boundary in Hillsborough. Those two things, as a package, went to LCDC for acknowledgement, which has to happen whenever there's a post-acknowledgement plan amendment, which this was. So it went to DLCD. The petitioner who had challenged the initial LUBA appeal on the remand challenged this metro ordinance at DLCD. Now, you may remember that the expansion of the urban growth boundary in the metro area was bound up in the urban rural reserves decision. So, as soon as the first metro ordinance was adopted, our office drafted a memo to the City Commission explaining that the Metro Title IV lands map had been corrected and recommended that the City Commission remand the matter back to the Planning Commission to take steps to deal with the Title IV lands map and to deal with this utility issue that petitioners raised. And so that's what we advised the City Commission to do. And in June of 2011, they did that. And that's what you have in the minutes of your packet for this work session. But what we didn't know at the time was that the petitioner was going to challenge the LCDC order at the Court of Appeals. So we have so in 2011, the petitioner challenges Metro's ordinance. In 2012, DLC issues an order approving the ordinance, the Metro ordinance. In January 2013, Elizabeth Grazer Lindsay and a number of, this is the petitioner, and a number of Thousand Friends of Oregon and a number of other groups that were particularly concerned about the urban growth boundary expansion in Washington County, challenged the ordinance to the Court of Appeals. While that case was pending, there was a Court of Appeals challenge called Barker's 5 versus LCDC, which was the Urban Rural Reserves case that was also pending at the Court of Appeals. Had absolutely nothing to do with Beaver Creek, had nothing to do with this area, had to do with the designation of urban and rural reserves metro-wide. Because that case had to be resolved before the urban growth boundary expansion case could be resolved, the Court of Appeals stayed the urban growth boundary expansion case, which included the Title IV maps issue. In January 16, 2013, the Barker's 5 case was argued and decided a year later, February 20th, 2014. So this whole time, this Title IV maps issue has been bound up and stuck in the Court of Appeals, and we couldn't do anything with it while it was stuck there. In March of 2014, the legislature passed the Grand Bargain, which settled the location of the urban growth boundary for everybody. It did not deal with this Title IV maps issue. It didn't even deal with it at all. In June 2014, the Department of Justice representing DLCD filed a motion to dismiss the remaining portion of the appeal that wasn't resolved by the Grand Bargain under the case that the Goal 14, the Goal 14 objections raised by Elizabeth Grazer Lindsay were resolved in the Grand Bargain. In other words, the urban growth boundary was set, all the uses were set, everything was done. And in September of 2014, the Court of Appeals agreed and dismissed the pending appeal. So, it is at that point we were able to take jurisdiction back and deal with the issue on remand. So where we sit right now is with a remanded Luba case from 2008. We know from Luba that we had to correct the Title IV map issue. We don't know to what extent we had to correct the utility transportation issues, but we have in the interim adopted a new transportation system plan, a new public water master plan, and a new sewer master plan. And all of those things include the Beaver Creek area. So we have that missing data that we think it's really important to get before you and consider, because it kind of closes the circle from a planning perspective. And it's also been a long time. So
Could you repeat that from the beginning? I got lost.
You finally got it on tape, though.
You need a mind map, Tom. That's what you're talking about.
You know, Tom, you're sitting really close to her.
Yeah, she might slap you, so I'd be careful over there.
Sorry.
We are sticking with our original 2011 recommendation and proceeding with that, which was this remand back to the Planning Commission to consider. I mean, we've got to make some findings about the Title IV map consistency, and we need to revisit, we think, the sort of utility infrastructure issue piece, and that includes transportation, water, sewer, police, schools. There are some Metro Code standards that talk about schools. And so we are going to work with the Planning Commission to make sure that the evidence is limited to just those issues. We don't anticipate revisiting the map itself and the assumptions made under it. We think that still makes for a complete community. And anything else?
Can I ask a question, though? Once we've done all this, can those petitioners still appeal this again?
Absolutely.
After we've done all this work? Wow.
Absolutely.
So it could be extended out further.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's sort of part of the reason why we sort of want to narrow the issues. You know, I mean, the
Okay.
whole idea of an efficient land use process is one that moves the planning effort forward, and we've got an area that's been needed to be concept planned, and you know, we want to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Carrie, you mentioned schools. Do you guys look at schools when?
Yeah, she said schools.
There's a Metro Code, one of the title, isn't it?
Do you
I
guys
think
look
it's
at
the
that when
title.
you look at
11.
properties?
There's a Title 11 provision that
Yeah.
talks about schools.
Yeah.
It's an odd situation, especially since we don't have jurisdiction over the school district, so we
Right.
rely on the studies that they've done. If there's needed lands, we try to identify those in cooperation with the Oregon City School District, who was part of the process.
Well,
Yeah.
as I have mentioned before, I do not.
Interesting.
It's my contention that the Oregon City School District does not understand how it fits into the process of state agency coordination and the goals that deal with those facilities. I have not seen evidence of that in the whole time that I have
That's true.
resided in this community, and
Typical.
I think that is one of the big holes in us trying to move forward with things that we deem important and trying to get them on board. And they are supposed to be coordinating with us on a regular basis, and I just have not seen that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. Does the school district boundary, is that in parity with the city boundary?
No, it's
No.
way bigger.
I mean,
It's bigger.
with the UGB?
And Wes Rogers, who's the school
Yeah.
district facilities superintendent, has been at our meetings, staff meetings, and commenting on the land that they own off of Old Acres Lane, just to the south of the concept plan area. So they're looking at it with us, and hopefully that will be adequate. But I'm going to go in a little more detail.
Could you make a note on that I would like to have a further in-depth discussion about that, because as you know, I have some rather strong feelings about the fact that we have schools that sit at the perimeter of our city limits, and we are having to bus everybody everywhere, and we have school facilities within the core of our city that are being abandoned and neglected, and it's a disservice to the people who live in the inner part of Oregon City.
I will invite him.
Let me throw my oar in the water here. I think that the question of land use planning is expanding. It's expanding at the metro level, at the state level, in the courts and what have you, based on need to facilitate public utilities and services. And that word need sort of suggests that we've got to have some findings in terms of capacity, which has to do with numbers. Now, when you talk about a police department, you're talking about number of patrolmen and things like that. And when you're talking about water facilities, you're talking about the source of water, where's it coming from? My point being that we're expanding this whole thing, and it's not coming at us because we're initiating it. It's coming at us from other parties. They're saying, hey, wait a minute, you got to think about this, 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 and this, because they're experiencing pressures outside of their agency, from the feds and from this, and it boils down to natural resources. My question is, where are we going to get the time, effort, and energy to come up with these numbers that are going to say we need X number of policemen, we need X number of firemen, we need more water, we need larger right-of-ways, and where is that going to be demonstrated and documented, either in maps or in statistical findings? That's a heck of an effort, but it's coming. It's coming.
And where our feeling, having looked at this a little more closely in the last few months, is that we have done a fair amount of that with our utility master plans, right? We determined what the demand is going to be for water and what the roads are going to require. So you're right with regard to police. But we feel like for the really expensive, really complicated components, the traffic and the water and sewer, we've done it, and we've done it recently, which is a really good place to be, and to have included this area in that evaluation.
But this slide that you have right now, this limited record as it's titled, that's pretty much the scope of what we're going to be looking at when we do this review for the readoption.
That's right. We'll be bringing findings back along with updated capital improvement cost numbers and estimates from the Public Works Department that show how these adopted utility plans and transportation system plans apply to the specific area. And along with that, making findings for adequacy of police, fire, and school district services. So I was going to go into a little more detail on the plan itself, if you'd like. Just referring back to the map that Metro adopted that reflects the new estimates for employment land. The blue area is the industrial areas, and the outer neighborhood areas, the remainder of the concept plan, showing 151 gross acres, estimated 121 net acres of industrial land. The plan itself estimates 157 gross acres and about 126 net acres of industrial land. So that would be the North Employment Campus. Just going back through the summary of the process summary from 2006-2007. Concept plan took a couple years to develop. There was a citizen advisory committee and a technical advisory committee. They had 12 meetings, site visits, open houses, meetings with Metro to discuss employment. There was a community design workshop, a market focus group, a sustainability focus group, a website, a project posters, signs, and mailers, and then 4 planning commission hearings and 10 city commission hearings. The open spaces and natural areas plan for for the concept plan area is pretty detailed. It's got areas that are definitely Title III areas, as well as areas that are identified as power line
You might
areas.
explain, not everybody knows what Title III is.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Wetlands and protected stream buffers, and sensitive areas that are under metro requirements for the city to adopt a plan for protection and standards for development in those areas. So Trimble Creek is one such spot that runs through the southern portions of the site. And you also have some significant tree grove areas in there that were talked about in the plan. Then you have several power line easements. And the idea with the concept plan is to try to utilize these natural areas as much as possible as not only open space and recreation areas, but potentially for use of stormwater management, for trails, and for developing a pedestrian network and a bicycle network within these.
Is the area in the upper, well, you just switched the map, in the upper left-hand corner, is that the area that we were discussing with regard to the Myers Road master plan?
Yeah, so Myers Road is coming in here.
Okay, yeah,
You'll
because
see
we
the
can't
high
see it on the
school.
screen, so we have to keep turning around.
Sorry.
That's all right.
And the Myers Road connection.
No, so
will be
the
coming up
area
over
you were looking at in Myers Road. Pete, go ahead and show where the terminus of Myers Road is right now at High School Lane with your pointer.
right there.
And so we were looking at the areas west of there.
Oh, okay.
It's between there and
From
Highway
High School
213.
Lane out this way to 213.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. I just, again, the maps were so tiny that
Right.
I couldn't quite tell where we were there.
But this shows the conceptual alignment for Myers Road in the concept plan area here. Another connection to Beaver Creek Road would be the Loader Road connection, Glen Oak Road connection, and up here the Claremont Road connection.
So why are those in green?
Well, they're considered to be green streets under the
Oh,
concept
okay.
plan. So
Okay.
each of the street sections that's adopted as part of the concept plan is designed to be a green street with swales incorporated into the design, and so that's why they're shown as
Okay.
green. And also the dotted lines represent regional trails and those sorts of things. These transportation connections were all adopted with the TSP update 2013. This shows where the edge of the Trimble Creek Habitat Preservation Area is. This area is steep and a Title III resource area. The concept plan talks about preserving views in this area and having unobstructed public access for a portion of this. And then you've got a Central Park
Does Metro
idea
own
here.
that?
No, this is all under private
It's
ownership
privately
now.
owned, okay.
Yeah. So those areas are considered constrained for development as well. Then the overall street system could deviate somewhat from this, but the general idea for the connections in this area, these are the major collector roads and cross connections in this area. As properties develop, there are several ways to achieve connectivity. This is just meant to illustrate various types of local street connection flexibility that could be achieved through master planning once the concept plan is adopted. So the idea is that some of the larger parcels would come in and do master plans, especially for the Northern Employment Campus. We could have curvilinear streets that match the topography. That's illustrated on the right. It's a fairly standard tight grid over here and a larger grid over here. Getting into some of the land use subdistricts, the main employment subdistrict is known as the North Employment Campus, and it talks about it being a tech flex campus area, 1 to 2 story stories with employment uses, connections to Clackamas Community College, utilizing power line easements to have some park and open space in there, realignment of Loader Road. The resource protection areas include tree groves, Thimble Creek, and various other recreation areas. PGE does own significant power line corridor easements in this area. There's a concept for a central tree grove and open space there. And the uses that are allowed under power lines are envisioned to be parking, storage, etc., to support the adjacent employment uses and buildings. Potential use of community gardens, stormwater treatment and detention, fostering community agriculture and solar access and things like that.
Why?
Why? Paul, there's a big push in this plan for it to be a sustainable type of community.
I know, but
Yeah.
I have been by part of the BPA power lines, and
Mhm.
they have a significant hum
Mhm.
that you can hear, and you hear crackling and snapping and popping
Yeah.
like it's a bowl of Rice Krispies. And I mean, I think it's great that it will be open, but
Yeah.
I just have concerns about the fact that we would be putting any people underneath those for any purpose, even like growing food.
We know you won't be hanging out there.
No, I will not be hanging out there, I assure you.
Right.
How are we using that word sustainable? I see that a lot.
Well, if you look at this plan in more detail, they go into a lot of depth on that. They're talking about it being light on the environment, but allowing businesses to thrive and allowing a variety of job opportunities for people to work and live in the same area. That's as simple as I can put it. They want it to be a model for sustainable development. So that means one of the things that they had recommended coming out of the plan is that there be a green building task force to take a look at the design and quality of the buildings so that those are, for example, the various types of environmental certifications that you're familiar with, including LEED and others, use of solar and wind power, and in particular designing stormwater and public facilities so that they infiltrate on-site rather than drain into the city storm system. Those are all ideas that are embodied in our utility plans as well.
On page 38 and 39 of the concept plan, it goes into a little bit more detail on sustainability and identified principles for sustainable community design that you could kind of go through that the committee had come up with kind of headings and then a little bit more of direction underneath each one of those.
There's, if you read ahead of that too, in the low 20 pages, 25 on it, talks about how the streets will be developed. It's fairly detailed.
Mhm.
So you should probably take a look at that, Bob.
The
It
other
does also give how much it's
Oh,
going to cost. An estimate, I guess, of how much it's going to cost.
The next land use area is discussed is south of the North Employment Campus is the Central Mixed Employment Village. And this is the area shown in purple here. The idea in this area is that there would be 3 to 5 story buildings with an active street level and program connections to the high school and college. It'd be based around a connection of Myers Road here in this location, which is where the apartments that were recently approved would be built as a portion of this area. It has a central open space to the east, and there's a Main Street mixed-use center, which is the red area at the intersection with Glen Oak Road as it leads into the site. Shown here is a central tree grove, resource protection area, and this is really a transition area between the North Employment Campus industrial area and the more residential and mixed-use areas to the south of the plan.
Are we going to get into more detail about exactly what that is, what that means?
Kind of uses?
Well, the terminology specifically. I mean, I don't want you to have to do it today, but
Yes.
I'd like to get
Yeah.
a better understanding of.
Mhm.
I think I know what it means, but I'd rather hear somebody else say what it actually means.
Yeah, well, bear in mind that the concept plan and the adoption of the zoning, the zoning will actually come later. At this point, we're just adopting the plan as it is written, so
So
some
we're
of it's
trying
conceptual.
very hard in this area to avoid
Mhm.
things like strip commercial. Like when you come past the fire station on Malala Avenue, we've got various and sundry developments there. That's not what we're talking about.
No, I think what you're talking about here is very much based on it being a walkable and bikeable community. They designed a lot of these areas with a quarter-mile radius to analyze how accessible these areas would be to residential walking, and that's in the plan as well. Certainly, the design standards that are ultimately adopted to implement this plan are going to avoid any kind of auto-centric parking design for the front of the buildings and that sort of thing, similar to what we've got right now. Doubtless, this area is going to move a lot of traffic at the same time, so it's going to be a balance between good building design and locations of parking lots. It'll be a challenge, particularly with respect to Beaver Creek Road in the interim. And we'll talk about that briefly in a little bit.
So are we also going to talk about, I guess one of the things I had a big question mark in my jotting down notes in this document was, to me, the timing of a lot of this is critical. I guess my concern is we've got some development already approved or pending for whatever reason. It's not there yet, but it seems like there's a concern to me about how to get some of the things in there. I know if they build it, they will come, but are we going to end up with a whole bunch of the residential stuff hanging out there without having the other part? I mean, I know again it has to do a lot with financing and lending, and there's that whole concept, but I mean, it's just, that's what I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is that I can see the grand plan, but then the devil's in the details. And so are we going to have a whole bunch of high-density apartment complexes where people are still going to be getting in their cars and driving because the rest of the infrastructure or the development infrastructure that we would like to see there isn't there or hasn't come yet, where it's not an answerable question. It's just
Right.
it's just something I was looking at and going,
So
couldn't quite wrap my head around
one
that.
of the things we've been doing with Eric Underwood, the Economic Development Manager, has been working with Clackamas County and the state to look at employment industrial lands. We just received a grant to do the infrastructure planning to get to those industrial lands. So Pete, if you could flip back to the North Employment Campus. So essentially the sewer stops up just north of the concept plan area in Beaver Creek Road. Mm-hmm. And so part of this grant is to refine the infrastructure, design, engineering, and cost estimating so that we can start to get some of that infrastructure to those areas where it would, when you look at the market to try to get to industrial lands, it's a little bit more difficult than it is to, say, get to residential. Mm-hmm. So there are incremental steps that we're trying to take to incentivize or provide that infrastructure for those employment industrial areas. But, that being said, apart from, whether we made it a local improvement district or an urban renewal area or just made it a priority to put in public infrastructure for those employment lands, it is market driven. But you also, you do have the annexation process, residential over industrial, those are policy questions that we'll address as they come in. But, to say the city has never taken a position that says, oh, we're not going to allow development of X until we get Y. Which I agree is difficult when you're looking at some of this. The other part of this is that the residential areas tend to be at the end of the line. You need to get the infrastructure there, water, sewer, and whatnot. But in terms of the uses, that's a little bit more difficult for us to control.
I think one of the big problems you can run into is when you get down to the zoning details of the plan, that you can create zones that are too small and too small to be able to accommodate any of the uses that you're proposing here as design build out. So you end up with this little tight checkerboard, and I don't think this is happening here, but just want to caution against it. You end up with this tight little checkerboard of zoning designations that look really cool on paper with all the little colors and everything. But then when developers come forward to try to develop the property, they don't have enough room for the parking or the landscaping or anything else that you require. And you end up without it happening
way
ever.
way underperforming,
Yeah.
or not being able to pencil.
Yeah.
It's pencil, yeah. Well, I
Well,
know.
the other thing, just from my perspective as an architect, the thing that most of the developers that we work with find that there has to be enough demand for the retail for them to go forward with retail development.
Yeah.
And what we find is that the grand plan of these mixed-use areas is that there's going to be this balance and everything, but until the retail or until the residential is fully established, there's not
gotta
enough
go in
foot
there.
traffic to justify the retail. So during the build-out period, what I think you tend to see is a lot more residential development at the front end, and then the retail development follows later as the area gets populated.
As they can justify it.
Because the whole concept of having a walkable neighborhood assumes you have people there. And if there's no people living there, then nobody's going to build retail and hope people walk there. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but I mean, in an ideal world, they'd be built simultaneously, and that way we don't end up never getting the retail, which
However,
which is what we've all seen.
The reality
happen.
is developers don't think that way. They think,
Well, I know.
I got to have something there to justify.
But that's why we're the planners and
Building.
we're not the developers.
That's right.
Following up with your question, Denise, we're going to delay the effective date of this plan until we have the zoning ready to go to. So to the extent we can present it all at once or it happens all at once, we're going to try to facilitate that as best we can.
As best we can. yeah.
Shadow zoning.
So, Paul, I don't know if you remember when we were going through acknowledgement back in the old days, we were told we were nuts to zone or plan for that area around the campus to be campus industrial or tech industrial or whatever you want to say. And the thing that DLCD told us is that we were looking at a 20-year concept, so that we needed to have lands that were planned for that future industrial use that we knew was going to happen, or we were wanting to have happen, and we were using the college, and we had worked very closely with the college to make sure that there would be some synergy with that sort of zoning and their needs. So, it hasn't totally happened yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
From where I sit, with the exception of the Blue Heron site and Forest Hills Park in Portland, the public sector has never really been willing to get a dog in the fight and design and form urban areas through the creation of open space. They've never done that. Now think what that would mean if we had $1 billion to spend in the Portland metropolitan area. We could put open space here, we could put open space there, we could put transportation systems here, and we could form our communities. But we have to be willing to step up to the plate.
Has your bank account grown
Yeah,
since
I
the
still
last
got
time we
that
talked?
$224 million floating around somewhere, okay?
Metro
But
bond.
unless we commit to that, then what we're doing is telling people, the private sector, what you can't do. And we're always reacting. We're not taking a forceful...
You mean proactive? Being
Yes, proactive
Yeah.
stance in this, and saying we want to enter into a partnership with you, and we're going to form our community with you. We're not going to let you form our community yourself, because look what's happened. How are we doing with that so far?
Not so good.
Not really good.
Not so good.
Okay, so these concept plans are going to have to either, okay, we're not going to do it, and we're going to admit it, and we're going to just the laissez-faire, and we're going to put up with it, okay? Or we're going to join with you, and we're going to spend the money to do it. Now, we're doing a little bit of it down here at the Blue Heron, but that's a natural feature. And you keep hearing about the Forest Park and what a great air cleaner that is, an air conditioning unit, and so on and so forth. And that's great if we had 10 or 15 of them around the Portland metropolitan area. But I'm not going to throw in with these concept plans completely. I'll join with you in the discussion, but I see this as a weakness in every concept plan I've ever seen. The public not being willing to enter in as a partner with the private sector. So anyway.
Certainly, the public infrastructure costs are horrendous and require a lot of innovative thinking. By
That's what I thought we were here for.
Yeah, so, but in order to begin the process, the plan must be adopted prior to any annexation and zoning. So that's what we're here to do.
And I know this is impossible to talk about, but is there any discussion in the plan? I didn't see anything about, the pass-through traffic from developing areas out in outside of Oregon City. Because they're a user of the system and the infrastructure as well, but they're
Well,
sort of
the transportation component has to look at the Beaver Creek capacity and the effect on the Beaver Creek 213 interchange.
from outside impacts.
And an aspect of that is separately the city and the county and ODOT are looking at the alternative mobility standards that you were discussing during the transportation system plan.
Right.
Those are going to need to be adopted by the city. Our transportation consultant, John Replinger, is going to talk about that at the public hearing. And John Lewis is working on that as well.
Yeah, and I guess it's also, the argument always comes up about the expense of implementing a plan like this, and I always like to look for, and I don't know how easily this is done, but just for your sake, as an argument to have the expense for not doing something like this, and how expensive that's going to be. Because we always like to attach expense to plans and saying, oh, well, this is going to be a really expensive plan to do. We don't know if we're going to be able to do it. Well, what's the alternative, and what's the cost of not doing it?
Well, Bob suggested we have toll gates at the entrance to Oregon City.
I like it, just like in the old times.
I volunteer to collect.
We had the Barlow toll gate at one time, historically, but I don't think jacking up the SDC charges beyond.
Well, they have a toll road down in Southern California.
Is going to be the
everybody just
answer
loves.
because they're pretty high as they are right now.
Yeah.
While it's while infrastructure is obviously a large number associated with that, I think one of the things is that that's a beginning number, and it's a number that doesn't account for what the private side brings in, the new assessed value, the property taxes associated with that, the income taxes associated with full build out. So while it you could call it horrendous, but it's a planning number to get started. And when you talk about public-private partnerships, it's something that we're doing with Blue Heron, and it's something.
Sorry, it's the battery
It
on my,
was you.
on my car.
I told you it was you.
Is that your pacemaker?
So unless you have those on a plan, there's no way to plan on how you're going to fund those over the next 20-year planning horizon or longer. And so I would just say that I agree that public-private partnerships, if it's something that the city desires, would like to see sooner, whether it be an investment in industrial lands, there are methods to do that.
Well, from my point of view, there's been a pretty radical shift in the way that these things are funded over the last 40 or 50 years. And it used to be that the public would just build the infrastructure and pass it on to the taxpayers. But now such a large portion of that cost is directly charged to the development community that I think we're in a situation now where most of the development has to pay as they go for the system that they're going to be generating. So On the other hand, I think it's incumbent on us to create a structure like this that allows them to develop property and increase the property value and the utilization of that property in exchange for the cost of what they're paying to build that infrastructure.
I would agree. Yep.
Before you get away from the, as you call it, the purple area, another note I wrote to myself is that I really don't want to see, and forgive me for this term, but this is what it turned, I don't want to see an apartment ghetto happen down there or anywhere else in Oregon City where there's just nothing but apartments. Is there a provision in the mixed employment village for ownership opportunities or condominiums or something other than just, for rental apartments? Because we all know from our friends to the north in Portland, when you have those enclaves, there are certain other social situations that end up occurring because you've just got this concentration of one type of use and not a mixed-use sort of development.
Well, I think when we show findings for compliance with Title 11 and Title 4, we have to make a finding that we are providing a diversity of housing types. Title 11 does not require that the city mandate tenure or, provide a certain amount of area for ownership, something that I'm not sure we can even legally do. However, the hope is that the quality of the design standards for multifamily, the ones that we adopted in 2010, actually 2008, would be coming to bear on any multifamily units that are built in here, in either the mixed-use zone or any R2 zones that are ultimately built there.
But it doesn't preclude that.
Doesn't preclude that, no.
I mean, there's some nice open space areas where you could have, some condominiums that would be for, a senior living facility
Sure.
or something of that sort, something like Willamette
Right.
View or...
Well, and just because it might go in as an apartment doesn't mean it can't be a condominium later.
Yeah, we don't have a good track record on condos here in Oregon City.
Then see them do that and make us feel otherwise.
Well, I think one of the reasons that you're seeing that has to do with, number one, the economy, and number two is there's a lot of legal issues related to condominiums versus apartments.
Mhm.
A lot of developers just
They want to stay away
They-
from,
they
yeah.
want to stay away
There's a
from
lot of paperwork with condos.
So between the legal issues and the market demand, that's why we're seeing so many apartments right now. There was a phase 25 years ago when everybody was building condominiums and hardly any apartments.
Mhm.
So it goes through cycles,
Mhm.
and it's hard to predict when that cycle is going to turn.
So the concept that I've heard about that's successful is to mix high-end housing with low-end housing and integrate it so that people in low-end housing or rental housing have more opportunity and people that are in high-end housing instead of just concentrating low-end housing in one large area. So that's been a successful model in some of the other urban areas.
Well,
That
there's mixed income units
Yeah.
as well, where you have that same
exactly.
concept. There's a new one being built in the River District in Portland right now that's going to be mixed income.
Well, who was that movie mogul that just did that down in Walnut Creek or somewhere down in the Bay Area? I think he created a whole bunch of low-income housing right in the middle of one of the highest end areas.
If you remember who that is, maybe we can Google that and look at it.
Yeah, it was
So I'm just going to finish this up and
George Lucas.
yeah.
Yeah.
The east and west mixed-use village, this is the area where the golf course is. The west mixed-use village envisions varied densities, residential, up to a density of R2, so 2,000 square foot lot density that we have. And then in the eastern mixed-use village, it would be similar to an R5 zoning type density over here. So this is predominantly a residential area, but it does envision some close by walkable areas to get to eventually for services and amenities.
Has ODOT chimed in at all about this plan?
Yeah, we're meeting with ODOT. They will be looking predominantly at the adoption of the alternative mobility standards,
Yeah.
what the city comes up with.
I imagine there'd be
Yeah.
some offsite improvements that would be necessary for this.
Right, and the Beaver Creek Road is under county jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the city commission has asked us to take a look at the cross-section of Beaver Creek Road as part of this readoption process.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
probably your biggest hurdle in this.
Yeah.
Beaver Creek Road was a market road. you know.
Was it? Yeah, I guess it was.
Yeah.
Pete?
Yeah.
I've seen a course.
Denise just mentioned to me, and I think it's a great idea, could we potentially get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation in maybe a PDF form or something?
Certainly.
Because the maps in here are really better than the...
They're a little higher
we had,
resolution, yeah. This is, I can do that for you.
Yeah, if you could
I'll put it on the
send us-
website as well.
Yeah, send us a PDF, that'd be great.
Okay.
The other thing that I should point out while you're talking about distributing information, we are going to add what we do on remand to the record from 2007. So what we probably ought to do, Pete, is make some electronic copies, distribute them to the planning commission members
Of the previous...
of the previous record.
Okay, well, you can tell me what the bill will be. I am not printing that out on my computer, my printer at home. That's what she said.
You're not
Kill
going
it.
to want to print this.
It's
I will pay for a copy.
the 4 3-ring binders.
Yeah, I will, yeah.
Can you
She said electronic.
Can we get an executive summary?
I don't know if I want to read that.
Carry it around on that.
I don't think you need to read it. I'm just telling you that we're going to add to the record
the
because this
record.
is a remand proceeding. It's all
Right.
part of the same proceeding. So
So-
I'm just
so
going
we-
to tell
we've
you
got
that
the-
we can make it available to you at your disposal.
Oh,
I have
please.
it in my office. You can come by anytime.
So
I
we've
might
got
have to
the
camp
original
out there.
record, and we're adding another layer on
That
top.
original record is too small.
Could we,
There we go.
could we
Boxes
make
and
like
boxes.
campground reservations and bring our sleeping bag? Because we'll have to stay there.
They could put them on
To
little
read it.
iPads and give us each an iPad with all of it on there.
We'll have to figure out a way to make it available because I think
Yeah.
It could clog up our computers.
I think we had computers back then.
I don't think the planning commission signed up for spending the rest of our lives reading the record on this particular
No,
item.
I don't think you need to.
Okay,
because
good.
what we're asking some very specific
Specific
questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think information that are around those questions and around the major issues of this are really the
See
most-
what you're in for, Brian?
Yeah, I don't want to go down into the weeds about what you guys have already done.
And I do think focusing on these specific areas that we're really considering is the best way to go and not just wander off on, I mean, I know we love rabbit trails here. It'd be nice if we can kind of confine ourselves to,
Well, we are asking questions so we can understand what
Well,
the
this is a work
contextual
session to
relationship
expect when it
is
comes to
of
a
all
full
these parts
conversation.
and help us get
Have a
down to the
pepper
part that we need to focus on because they're not independent of one another. Unfortunately, they are all integrated. And,
November?
you know,
True that.
the more you know, the better decision maker we can be. It's
So,
not, they're not parts we're going to be able to change. I'm not asking to change it. I'm just trying to understand conceptually what this is supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Because it mentioned in there some hybrid plan they came up with, and I said, well, what was that?
Well, this represents the hybrid plan, which had the support going forward. So the acreages in the hybrid plan are shown here. Overall gross acreage of the land use areas is 284 and 235 acres net. You can see how those are broken out. Approximately 113 acres of open space, parks, and natural areas, and about 56 acres of right-of-way.
Sure like to see that to be rumored.
In terms of employment impact, it was analyzed on a jobs per acre basis. And so this is what they came up with, approximately 5,073 jobs and approximately 1,000 housing units. Yeah.
How do they determine the jobs per acre when we don't know what kind of employment's going to be there?
That's a good question. Do you know how they did that, Tony?
It's a formula.
Tony, how did they come up with the jobs per acre analysis?
I'd have to go back to get the specifics. We worked with Metro as well as some of the property owners who were bringing in additional information about how employment uses are changing and that you can get larger employment per square foot as manufacturing has modernized. So we did work with Metro to kind of come to what was a reasonable assumption for a square footage employee per square foot.
I think there's an acronym for that, WAG.
No, it wasn't quite as WAG.
There's numbers. Yeah,
it's based
but,
on,
yeah.
so if it's tech use, there's a number of jobs per acre for that. If it's manufacturing or high-tech manufacturing, there's numbers for that. There's a whole list for Metro. That's how we were figuring it out before. We're figuring out, okay, in the best of all possible worlds, we think this is going to be this and this, and we, and then you sort of adjust them a little bit, but it's not just coming out of the air, Tom.
Yeah, they're just nice figures.
There is a report, I think it was Eco Northwest.
Yeah.
Eco Northwest did the study on the jobs and employment impact, so we got a copy of that.
Okay, Pete, you just got my attention. You're giving us dates.
Okay, yeah, so next steps for staff are meeting with all of our advisory committees that are Citizen Involvement Committee on the 5th of October, Natural Resources Committee on the 14th, Transportation Advisory Committee on the 20th, Parks and Rec Advisory Committee on the 22nd,
That's a
and
tight schedule.
Caulfield Neighborhood Association on the 27th. So we'd be giving brief presentations to all these groups
Where's the Beaver Creek Hamlet presentation?
at the Beaver Creek Telecom place, I believe, but no, we haven't scheduled that. Planning Commission is going to be publicly noticed. We've already done our Measure 56 notice, but we'll be sending out a second set of notices and doing a newspaper notice that will be much, much wider. So we're going to be going pretty much 300 feet from any of the intersections that are affected by the concept plan, all of the Caulfield Neighborhood Association, and then both east and west of Beaver Creek Road, hitting all of those areas and all the neighborhood associations for the public notice.
Didn't we do a citywide one before?
We probably did do a citywide one back before.
When it was
but-
first going through the
Yeah, it was
first.
first going through, yeah.
That's what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Because we did one for South End and we did one for that.
Right. So that's that.
So,
And-
Pete, go back to that
Yeah.
last slide on the dates.
Oh, this one.
The dates.
Yeah.
So you've got Planning Commission on November
Monday,
23rd. Is
yeah.
that when you're looking for a decision, or we're going to start talking about this?
Well,
That's
we'll
Thanksgiving.
be probably asking for a
Thanksgiving,
decision at that point.
You going to bring a turkey?
Yeah. But should
We have to pick date certain, realizing if there are more hearings, we'll continue the city commission.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking at the Planning Commission date and then the City Commission date. Basically,
Right after each other.
that's a week apart.
Allegedly.
So are we looking at having multiple hearings on this prior to that date?
We may need to.
That would be the first hearing date.
But these are the ones that
talking
are,
about having multiple
these are the
work
public
sessions.
notice dates, yeah. Yeah.
So
If you don't get through it on the 23rd, it'll be continued to the second Monday in December, and we would continue the city commission meeting.
Right, that's what I was getting at.
Okay.
That space between the Planning Commission and the City Commission is really tight.
If you get through it in one night, we'll be at the city commission on the second. If you don't, we'll be continuing it.
Gotcha.
So how many work sessions do you have built into this for us?
Right now, this is the only one we have, Planning Commission, but we haven't scheduled the City Commission one yet. I don't know that they are going to want to do this as a work session. Yeah.
I hate to be the one that has us have more meetings, but this isn't going to be enough. This is just too voluminous.
Citizen comment will take up a lot of time too, probably.
So at the November 23rd hearing, that would be the hearing that we would be taking public testimony.
Certainly, yes.
Okay. So the plan would be, or your agenda would be to bring to us on the 23rd a final draft.
Yeah, we'll be preparing a staff report 1 week prior to November 23rd with the Public Works memorandum that summarizes the utility planning and TSP and the transportation system planning. We'll have input from whatever agencies have commented to date, as well as the school district, the fire district, and Clackamas River Water, as well as any other agencies. The county, obviously. Communicating with Karen Burig, is their long-range transportation planner over there. She's been to all of our meetings and is going to be providing input for the county. Yeah.
So we would be looking at the final draft of the concept plan on the 23rd, taking public hearing, and with the recommendation from staff for approval.
Approval of the concept plan, yeah. So we're
Come-
not going to
come to with
change.
findings.
We're not planning to change this document. We will be bringing an updated memorandum with the capital improvement numbers on it.
Okay.
And,
Are we going to have
yeah.
some work session discussions about, specifically about how we need to be looking at this and how we're going to approach it? I'm just feeling very inadequate at this point in time to go, oh yeah, I can leap to the 23rd and make a decision, when I don't have a clear understanding about the parts that we need to really focus on.
But this is not, this is a limited remand
that's what I'm saying. I don't
to the
understand.
planning commission to only consider
That's right.
Title IV lands
I
and
agree.
infrastructure. So what we're going to bring back to you is a staff report that deals with Title IV lands and infrastructure. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to take the analysis from the Beaver Creek concept plan, loop it back around with the master plan, and come up with some conclusions.
Well, I'd
And
like,
you're going to have a traffic section, you're going to have a water section, you're going to have a sewer section. I mean, we haven't written it yet, but
I
that's
know.
what I'm envisioning it being.
I,
And so there's not going to be a whole lot of policy making, I don't expect.
and I'm saying I want to have a better understanding of those specific component parts that we are going to need to focus on with regard to this specific remand application. I do not feel that I want to wait till I get this humongous report and then try to digest all of that. I would like to have a little more
Advanced.
breakdown and a little more advanced sort of, okay, let's refresh our memory about that. I mean, I don't remember everything we talked about in the transportation system plan or the sewer master plan or the water master plan as specifically relates to this, Carrie. That is what my concern is. I don't feel that I can adequately make some decision when, we looked at it, we talked about it, we moved on.
Well, I think, what I hear from Denise, and I can't speak for everybody else, but I think I suggest an executive summary where if you can take the whole document and boil it down to a page or two that just really explicitly identifies these are the things we're looking at, this is the scope of our review, and here's the issues that you need to make decisions on.
And how it applies to the remand.
Right,
That's
exactly.
all we're looking at.
I mean,
Maybe
if it can
it's
be
having
just a-
John come in here and talk to us about those specific parts of those facilities plans that we have looked at as it pertains to this narrow focus box.
Right, and I'm just suggesting.
Well, I think we could take it the other way too, and just look at the aspects of the master plan and how they comply with each of those plans. like we normally do.
Yeah, but I don't want to wait till the
Right,
hearing to do
because
that.
we
I'd like to
allowed
have
the
some.
planning commission.
But I think we can rely. I think we can
Thinking-
rely on our
Originally
staff
in there,
to
and
be
now
able
that's been
to
remanded
come up with those
proposals.
findings.
It's changed.
I agree, but
That's
we're
what
going
we're
to
still
get it
in.
1 week ahead of time.
Because
That's
it
a
wasn't
lot of
available
material to
on
digest.
before.
I would like to
I
have
agree.
a little bit of a discussion before we get there about
Okay, sorry.
these are the things we're
Couldn't get
focusing
within
on,
there.
these are the things we're looking at.
Well,
Here's how it all, and then they bring us the report. It will make the reading the report so much easier.
I would just say this, is if we're not comfortable making a decision on the 23rd, we'll just have to continue it to the next meeting.
Well, I'd like to be able to make a decision on the 23rd with some homework backup in my back pocket, so when I come, I'm not going to fully understand it 100%, but I'd like to be about 80%.
Right. Well, I think if we could get the executive summary the week before, and so we're not just looking at a big stack of paper, it would be really helpful.
I'm trying to avoid the week before dump. I'm asking for a meeting that talks about those things ahead of the week before, like maybe a work session.
Another work session.
Another work session early in November.
Well, maybe
or end
November.
of October.
What's the one before that? It'd be the
Got
the 11th.
I don't want to make
10th.
extra work for staff, but it's like that's a lot. That's a lot of decisions. So we have the 9th and the 23rd. We have the meeting on the 26th. No, excuse me, 26th of October.
Tony, you're going to take out of these various studies, transportation and utilities, various factors as how they apply to the remand and enter them into the record as exhibits. And along that, with that, how do they apply? That's part of the record. And ask us to adopt that. And I mean, that's kind of an abbreviated type of process, isn't it? I mean, it shouldn't be long and extended.
Yeah, I mean,
Would
we're
it
talking
be-
we're talking water, sewer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Would it be feasible to maybe have another work session on November 9th to just pull together everything that we need to consider before we meet on the 23rd?
I'm not sure where we're going to be.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest.
Well, I'm also thinking of consideration of the staff. If we can even just have a discussion about it, you don't have to have all the paperwork done, but just go back and just refresh our memory about those things that we need to be
I
focusing
guess
on.
we've put out dates for the hearing. We've got a timeline for staff and consultants to return product. We don't have to make a decision in one night. I mean, and I understand where you're coming from, Denise. I'm leery to commit because I don't know what we'll have ready for you. Essentially, 3 weeks. We'd have to have it ready on the 1st of November in order to get it in the packet for a work session 2 weeks ahead. I'd rather, the record's out there. You can ask the questions. We can walk through it during the hearing. If we need to continue it, we continue it. I'm not. There's no 120-day rule here or anything like that. And if we need the extra time, we'll take the extra time. I'm more worried about just making sure we get a good product to give you. And knocking 3 weeks off at this point in the calendar makes me a
Right.
little nervous. I
So
don't want
if
to waste your time.
Again, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for finalized reports. I'm not asking for documentation that's going to go to the hearing. I'm asking for a little more background material that we already should have, just to brief us. And if I have to come in separately, if nobody else is interested in it, that's fine. I'm trying to do this for me so I can be a good decision maker on this, so that I can better understand what I need to be focusing in on for the master plans that we already have and how it relates to this project. And we should already have a bunch of that information without having anybody to generate anything. It's just we have it. I just need a refresher on what the heck we did. I mean, I've got all my notes. I've got piles of planning commission stuff at
You want a
home.
refresher on all 3 master plans that we've adopted? Water,
Only
sewer,
only as
transportation?
pertains to this specific area.
That's what we're going to be producing. Are
I
those
thought we already
findings.
had, our master plan already covered these areas.
Well, then we're taking out the specific parts.
You're refining it.
Well, to re-adopt because those didn't exist when we adopted this the last time around. The TSP's been updated, so we're going to pull out the parts that are relevant as to Beaver Creek. So essentially that's what we're producing, is what you're asking for, I think, is the refined site-specific. I don't know what else I would bring you, I guess.
Okay, let me just use an example. So we have a sewer master plan. So there's a part in it now, existing currently, that talks generally about the Beaver Creek Road area, correct?
Correct.
Generally.
Generally.
You guys are planning for the end game to refine that further?
No.
No.
We are pulling it out and putting it in this to re-adopt.
Okay, so if it already exists, what additional work do we have to do?
We're making findings against statewide planning goal.
Okay, well, I don't need the findings. I just need the plan part, which we already have, right?
I guess I'm not interested in. I mean,
Right.
I think
that's
that
still
what
just
we
after.
tell one, we have to. I'd prefer to present to all.
Okay, so I will make an appointment and I will come in and go through, not in one day, I will go through each of the master plans as it pertains to this particular area on my own.
Are they at the library, Tony? The master plans?
I don't know. They're online. I'm not sure if they're at the
I
library.
mean,
Right.
for staff, and I'm more than happy to share this, I've got a working matrix of each plan that you're referring to and what it says about the Beaver Creek Road area. And where possible, I, cut and pasted a figure or a map, and it's helpful because it encapsulates everything into a table. It's a little unwieldy, but you're welcome to see it, and I'll make it part of the record.
I think if you guys provide us with the record on the prescribed date here, I know it's really tight. I don't know why you guys have to have it so soon, but it's going to be all there. And if we plot on that date and we decide that we need more information, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more public testimony than we expect. And so we're going to have time to digest that at the very least. So hopefully that hearing is going to contain an explanation of the things that we're looking for, correct?
That's the goal. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Is
so,
to provide you in a format with findings
Yeah.
that cuts out the specifics of those larger master plans that are specific to this property.
Yeah. I just don't think that in this schedule, I don't think we're really equipped to do anything else. I think it would be, I don't know how we could do it.
Yeah, and I'm
Can I ask a
comfortable
question?
with that, and then if we have to continue it, we continue it.
Well, Tony, as I understand it, we're being asked to respond to the remand from Luba, right?
This wasn't, the only part that was remanded was the Title IV lands. These were other issues raised in the appeal that Luba did not address. So since that happened, we've adopted multiple new master plans. So we want to put the most recent information that we have into the record to justify the decision.
Justify what decision? The
To
decision we're
approve
gonna
the
make
concept plan.
in response to Luba, or just in the concept plan
Respond
process?
to the concept.
Concept plan process. Luba did not remand any of the infrastructure. They didn't comment on those objections. They only commented on the one objection, which was the Title IV lands. But we now have new.
And you want to get that into the record?
Yeah, it's the most
There's
recent data that we
8
have.
years' worth of information that need to be brought up to speed since that original decision.
Which, on the transportation system plan, we've already adopted, so that's a matter of record, right?
Well, also the water plan and the
These are
Sewer.
policies by the city we've already adopted.
We've already adopted.
But you just want to get a little bit more familiar with it.
Yeah, all those have been adopted in the last 4 years.
Do you have instant recall on what we adopted from
I
back
read
then?
that.
Because I don't.
I do.
I read that thing.
Oh, you do?
I read that thing in detail, and so help me God, I understood it word for word. Absolutely.
You're a better commissioner
Well,
than I am because I don't.
I'm being facetious, and you know it. We can't be expected to understand these things like the people who wrote it. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a traffic engineer. I take their professional opinion and I make a finding that, enter it into the record. We recommend this be the policy of the city. You see, but what I'm afraid of doing here is that we start to overthink this thing. I want to keep it simple. Keep it simple. Do our job. And
Well-
don't do more than we're required to do.
When did you
I-
give
I agree
this
with
to
you.
us?
Do we have a motion?
Hold on.
That was a month.
The
Yeah.
Commissioner Gile had a question.
It's taken.
I had a question 10 minutes ago. I've been waiting for you.
Frankly, I think, Tony and Pete, the thing that's making us a little bit nervous here is that you're giving us a date that doesn't look realistic for us to be able to push things through and allow the city commission to look at this on December 2nd.
And if they don't, we continue it,
And
just like we do with every other
If your
application.
schedule hadn't had that last date on there, I think we'd all be good with just going forward.
Those lines that we have to provide.
We're required
To
to
do
provide
notice.
dates.
They are required by state land use law to provide
Yeah, and
a
I-
notice and a date.
I think realistically, given the fact that we're going to be absorbing a lot,
Yeah.
and let's just assume we're going to have
I-
probably a dozen people speaking.
Oh,
in
I
the public
absolutely understand,
hearing.
and I agree.
The chances of us actually being comfortable with making
Sure.
a final decision that night are,
Yeah.
I'd say, slim.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you're right. It's you just one of those things where you've got to set a date as a staff
Well, you
person.
could have made it Christmas
Otherwise,
Day.
it keeps getting kicked down the road.
I think Commissioner Gile had a
Yeah.
question.
Anyway, thank you for indulging me. I'm sorry. It's just me. It's not you. A week to try to digest this stuff is not going to, I mean,
You can have as much time to digest as you need.
well, we won't get it except for a
Bring
week
some
ahead of
Tums.
time. That's what I
But
mean.
if we haven't, then we'll continue.
Because it's just a
Yeah,
lot of material.
We'll just continue.
It's taken me about 3 weeks to get through the Beaver Creek Road concept plan so that I could understand what I was reading and write notes and ask questions. So this is going to be much more than that. And I'm afraid
Yeah, well,
because I will be doing nothing but that. No eating, no sleeping, just reading.
Anticipate that we will probably continue, so you'll get an extra 2 weeks to digest.
Yeah, right at Christmas
With
time.
your digester turkey and the.
Yeah, wet turkey. There will be no turkey.
So let's move on then.
I think Commissioner
I've
Gile
been waiting
still has a question.
15 minutes later, I forgot what it was. No. Question is, we're addressing specific parts of the concept plan as you've been talking about tonight.
Correct.
So are we in any way, when you're putting the word out for the people who would like to testify, that we're not going to revisit the whole plan, that we're only, I mean, are we going to allow people to go back and revisit all the other situations? Are we going to specifically tell them we're only discussing these sections of it? Because that could eliminate a lot of testimony if people come and reiterate everything.
Right. In the public notice, we're specifically stating that it's a limited record and that the planning commission may disregard those items that are not pertinent to the limited record. So if it deals with the land use areas or the sub-district or the text of the plan that's drafted, you'd be asked to disregard that.
They get to say it anyway, but
Yeah.
and we listen
You
to
get
it,
to
but we
say
just
it,
say we
sure.
disregard.
Not unless
Absolutely.
Charles cuts them
Yeah.
off.
I was just wondering, because that could
Yeah.
either shorten the evening or extend it if they know that this is the only testimony that we're looking at. We could be until
It will be noticed that way.
Cool, okay.
And will we be getting new comments on police and fire in schools?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions at this time?
But
Tony, you have a director's update.
No, I don't tonight. I think we are good to go.
We're good to go.
What's going on with your city manager?
We
I
are
may be so
You're
bold.
looking at him.
Well,
interim. Yeah,
He's acting.
yeah.
yeah. It's
Did you notice the
Anything
tie?
publicly consumable?
they ask
no,
money to let it
there's
finish.
not. There's still an ongoing personnel investigation that
Wow.
is going on.
Well, something needs to be said pretty soon because the rumor mill around town is just getting fierce.
You should stop that.
If one more person comes up to me and asks me about it, I am literally going to scream because I know nothing.
Why is it taking so long?
Nothing. I know nothing.
Have any idea?
They're having to go back to his childhood. I'm just kidding.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
nothing that I can talk about at this time.
We can't talk about it.
I would say,
More rhetorical than anything.
given that, we're in adjournment.
Thank you.
All right.